guys? So this is about 22 minutes. There was a space call by Naked Truth. You guys got to see them, Paul and Heather got to come on. I did the Zoom call with them. This is their space call they finally got to do with Wes Christensen, the lawyer, of course, that's working with a couple of those companies and has come in the past and talked about the things they can do, along with Dave from Share Intel. Just a little bit of them introducing some of this stuff. It's just great information, and it's exactly right up our alley and what we're talking about. And it's things that I want to dig more into to understand. Because I get kind of the theory behind it, and I don't know why all these companies wouldn't potentially be using something like the Share Intel process. And then how can this benefit us in our stock play? How can this benefit us in our short squeeze? And on top of that, how can it just benefit the market as a whole with exposing corruption? Take a listen.
Guests tonight, Wes Christian and David Wanger. I'll be talking about Share Intel as well. If you guys don't mind introducing yourselves a little bit, telling us about your team, Share Intel, what it can do, what it has done, and potential to help bring transparency and honesty to Wall Street. Hey, Wes, welcome to the call. Sorry about your other account. If you don't mind giving us a brief introduction about you, your team, and then pass it off to David and his team, and talking about Share Intel and bringing transparency and to the Wall Street.
Sure, happy to be here. Sorry, somebody's hacking our account and trying to prohibit, us holding this event, which is ridiculous. But that's the environment we're in, unfortunately. So summarily, our team consists of multiple law firms across the United States. Warshaw Bernstein, my firm, the Cohen-Milstein firm, etc. As the group knows, we have been in this space for 21 years. We filed 21 lawsuits, basically. There's 2 current lawsuits you can go look at. The Northwest Bio lawsuit, which was filed by Cohen-Milstein, but I brought them in, frankly, to increase our bench that we needed as we take on, more of these lawsuits. Another one is a lawsuit in the Southern District of New York called Harrington. And essentially, both of those lawsuits are about spoofing, which is being done in large part by market makers. And unfortunately for the defendants in these cases, we figured out ways through our proprietary analysis process and using some of Share Intel's data, which is patented, to figure out who's doing this and ultimately also figure out who doesn't have the shares that they say they have, at least as it relates to the DTC. Summarily, we were involved in helping get Reg Show passed, various lobbying efforts. We worked with the Justice Department in Operation Bermuda Short. We worked with the Justice Department and our client Sedona that ultimately led to Repco, which was ultimately shut down, and the Badian brothers who were indicted, et cetera. I could go down the list. We tried to work with most of the agencies, but the reality is we're at a very pivotal time on this, and I'll get into that in a minute. I'll let David introduce himself and his company. And not only do we have lawyers in this space on our team, we have some of the best consulting experts in the country on spoofing, on naked short selling, on damages, etc. So we've got, about 30 to 40 people on our team working on this every day. And so ultimately, as we say in Texas, we're Texas Hold'em committed all in on this, as evidenced by the fact that I've given, thousands of hours, not only to Naked Truth, which incidentally, for those on the call, is a free resource of an enormous amount of information on that website. Essentially, most of what we do gets dumped on that website, plus everything else Naked Truth does to put it together. So with that, I'll turn it over to David.
Okay. Thanks, Wes. And hello, folks. I don't do a lot of these, but, Wes and I have been working together. I bumped into Wes many, many years ago on the Overstock case. We really cut our teeth, if truth were known, in the backs of the Overstock case. many years ago. But going back to the beginnings of ShareIntel, ShareIntel has two patents on a process. We're a software as a service, and in very simple terms, we created this to address a need to track ownership. In real simple terms, track ownership. There can only be, as it relates to this specific topic, one beneficial owner of any given share of stock. Underscore the word beneficial, regardless of how many times that share of stock has been rehypothecated. So, with that in mind, we developed algorithms, software that enable us to track, identify participants to the markers, quote unquote, the markers of naked short selling. So our system tracks settlement, our system tracks ownership without getting into great detail. The whole world's trying to figure out how we do what we do. Suffice it to say that we identified this as a problem many years ago when we again dates back to the Overstock days. But I went down to Washington as it relates to this conversation that we're having today. As it relates to what the SEC can do. We met with the SEC in Washington D.C. a few years back. The SEC signed an NDA with ShareIntel, which I'm told doesn't happen every day, FYI. So there's a limit probably to what I can talk about here. But again, suffice it to say that we track settlement and identify the participants to the markers of illegal naked short selling. What our software does, in very simple terms, is we provide a service to the C-suite, to the board of directors. We effectively, ShareIntel effectively turns on a security camera for issuers where none exists, and more importantly, hits the record button. So, in essence, we arm Wes and his team of lawyers with the critical analysis, with the litigation support that he needs to gain additional discovery. And I think Wes a second ago alluded to the fact, that at least the DTC piece, that's where we've been focused. A lot of this chicanery, as we all know, takes place in the dark pools and in X clearing. But we provide, suffice it to say that we provide the analysis that Wes and his team need. We can see the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, if you want to use that analogy. And what's below the tip of that iceberg, Wes and his team can go to work on with our analysis. There you go. Does that suffice for an intro?
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Follow up. Now, it's my understanding you also need the cooperation of these companies to implement that. That you may have this X-ray that can bring the transparency and clarity and integrity back to maybe a company that is on the fringe, if you will. But you need that cooperation from the company, and is that correct?
Well, yes. In very simple terms, what I tell CEOs, the boards of directors every day is, we've got a system that helps monitor supply. Okay, and we have to, we're appointing a third party authorized agent on behalf of the company to go about the business of aggregating, first and foremost, aggregating data that is private in nature. It belongs to the issuer. It's not out there for public dissemination, and we go out of our way to gain the confidence of the board and the C-suite by reminding them that we serve one master, and that is the C-suite. That is the board of directors. We serve the company. We don't repurpose this data. We don't dare make this data public. And that's a sensitive topic and maybe counterintuitive to a lot of your audience, but critical to gaining the confidence of the board is in the C-suite is that we maintain confidentiality. It's key and critical to our business model. And think about the nature of what we're doing. We may be uncovering knowledge, and we may be creating awareness, if you will, that some of the trusted advisors to the company may actually be the enemy. If in fact, you're to point a gun at the very investment bank that you depend on for your next capital raise. That's a tricky topic, and shareholders need to understand that some of these issues that we help uncover and expose, uh, are not necessarily topics that should be discussed in the public domain, if that makes sense.
Got you. Now, if a CEO, for instance, maybe wants to turn a blind eye or not listen, is there anything the public or an everyday investor could do perhaps to get their attention or write in or anything like that? Wes, David, anything?
I think there is, Paul, and in fact, if you'll recall, I actually drafted a form letter that's on the Naked Truth website that invited everybody that's a shareholder in various companies to write the CEO and essentially follow what's in that letter, which is encourage them to hire Share Intel to get the share count, at least the share count through the DTC. Don't forget that excludes ex-clearing, dark pools, some of the stuff that happens overseas outside the jurisdiction of the United States, et cetera. So they need to write them, because the bottom line is the board has a fiduciary duty to the company to protect it from any fraud. And of course, this is a ongoing, continuing fraud against, hundreds and hundreds of companies, if not thousands of companies, certainly hundreds. And so the board needs to uphold their fiduciary duty to the company and protect the interests of their shareholders and the company itself by investigating this. And the best investigative tool we know, at least from a forensic perspective, is Share Intel, to be candid, because I've used them in way in excess of 30 or 40 or 50 cases, because we've done due diligence. I think we're up to 73 or 74 public companies that we've done due diligence on. And of course, we've only filed, like I said, 21 of those lawsuits over the last 21 years, basically. But we're in the process of aggregating more, increasing our team to file a bunch of them. And I'll get into that in a minute. So that's the answer. Get the board and the executive officers to do what needs to be done to investigate the fraud that's occurring against the company. And if they don't do it, they're breaching their fiduciary duty, at least potentially. Can they do other things? Sure. But I don't think anything's more important than getting the imbalance data that Share Intel can get you once you hire them.
Thank you. And again, thank you for that letter that's up, the John Doe shareholder letter up on nakedtruth.info. Pretty much it's a plug and play, potentially manipulated stock, you believe, that you're an investor in. You put the stock symbol, sign your name. We've put together, I believe it was 10 addresses for the company, CEOs, things like that, to mail those letters into. Let your voice be heard. Everything's done. Take a few minutes. If you're upset with what's going on, let your voice be heard, and hopefully can bring that transparency to the market. Wes, if we could go and maybe talk a minute about the SEC, if you could give us a little background on it, what it does, what it's supposed to do, and has it fallen short?
Well, the SEC under the 33 and 34 Act are put there to make sure things are properly disclosed, number one, and everybody in theory has the same information, which we know in large part does not happen. But it's also put there to protect investors, right? And investors are those shares. So that's their duty. And that duty, as we all know, starting really in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the DTC bought the National Securities Clearing Corporation, is when the stock lending business ended up being the biggest money makers of Wall Street, or one of them. So if you look at the financials of Wall Street, proprietary trading's way up there, stock lending's way up there. So as far as income earners, so at the end of the day, the SEC is supposed to do that. Well, ultimately, in the early 2000s, we teamed up with the American Chamber of Commerce and a bunch of attorney generals, and we got Reg Show passed, which, to some extent is a toothless regulation, but at least it caused the people that were selling shares that weren't being timely delivered. Back then it was T3 to ultimately report those fails, if you will. But guess what? The Wall Street guys or gals both are smart in their mind, which they are, and for the most part, the people participating in this are obviously crooked, but they're smart. So they started marking most of the trades along that we saw, and you can see those regulations under SEC.gov, and go to mismarking tickets or violations of Reg Show, and you can read many enforcement actions, a good portion of which incidentally is on the Naked Truth website. And it'll show you that when they mark the trade long, it doesn't go in the short interest. So your reported short interest typically is 2, 3, 4 times what the reported short interest is, your actual short interest. Number two, it circumvents in their mind Reg Show, because if it's not a short, Reg Show doesn't apply. So when they mark it long, it's just another way to disguise what's going on. More misinformation, as we say. So fast forward, we then helped get the anti-fraud rule passed, but one of the rules we've not been successful in getting passed with lobbyists or others is the bona fide market maker exemption, which I believe is grossly being misused. I think the exception is you don't have to have a reasonable basis to think you can locate a share if you're a bona fide market maker. Well, I believe the market makers have now become co-participants in this illegal activity, at least certain market makers. And you can certainly read in the Harrington case and the Northwest Bio case who we believe some of those people are in the lawsuit. And we have the actual data there because we figured out a way to get it legally. And so you can read those lawsuits and become very educated on what spoofing is and what the data is I'm talking about. Now, fast forwarding to Gary Gensler's headship, kudos to him for getting on the phone with my friend and colleague Dave Lauer, and in doing so, at least making this a public forum to some extent. I have to tell you, though, I'm greatly disappointed in the rules that the SEC has come out with. While I applaud them for better, the best execution and order flow modifications and insider trading, new rules, etc., that did not address two key issues that must be addressed for this problem to go away. One, you must deliver what you sold and took the money for. I don't know any other asset in my 43 or 44 year career, I guess it's 44 now, that you can sell something, take the money, and deliver nothing. That's absurd, okay? So that's got to stop. That's number one. Number two, you should only be able to lend a share once. The truth is, in this space, in this litigation space, as we call it, shares are being lent to multiple parties, the same share. They call them locates. Stock lending has become a big money maker. If you go to the Gaming Wall Street documentary that just came out, or go to the old Wall Street conspiracy documentary that came out 5 or 6 years ago, what you're going to learn is a lot of these bona fide hedge funds, and there's not many of them, but the ones that are legitimate would pay massive amounts to borrow the stock. Well, many of them now know that the money they paid to borrow the stock was paid in vain because the stock didn't exist. So reality is, calling to get a locate is something that is not treated as seriously as it should be. And how you stop that is to only let a share be lent once until it's returned. Because at the end of the day, this whole fraud exists because of two principal reasons, other than the oversight agencies not doing their job, is one, it's done electronically now, and the auditors simply keep up with the cash, not the shares. That's number one. Number two, they don't enforce the laws that are on the books, which is, you can't rehypothecate. Make sure that people borrow a real share and make sure the share is delivered. If you control supply and demand, then you've accomplished a lot, because this is really about rigging the system, creating artificial supply in any form you can in order to overwhelm the buying public, so the demand can't keep up with the supply. The price goes down, and there you go. So Wall Street's figured out a way to make more money killing companies, frankly, than they do building them up. That's my view. And I think what the regulations that FINRA's brought and the SEC's brought, which again are costs of doing business, still nonetheless prove that what we're saying in all these lawsuits over the years is happening. The consequences they're facing aren't enough, but it's happening. So the reality is the SEC needs to do more. We're at a pivotal time in these cases and in this illegal activity, in my view. By the time you count the super stock people and even Wall Street Bets and Reddit, even though the bad guys have infiltrated some of that organization, in my view, nonetheless, there's still a bunch of apes out there that are team players on our side. By the time you count that, the additional lawsuits we're bringing, the future lawsuits we're going to bring, because we're increasing our legal team and our expert team, and I now have the finances to do that. And you combine that with a regulatory agency that at least seems more interested, and it's becoming not just a U.S. issue; it's becoming a worldwide issue. It's a movement. It's a movement. You combine that with the march that's going to happen. I'm told that march from